All right, it looks like I am recording. And welcome, everybody. My name is Lisa Nelson, and Jenna invited me to come today and give you guys a bit of a CDA knowledge injection that would help with some of the work that you're going to be looking at doing with CDA. Advancing. Let's see what I have going on here. Okay, there we go. So my background is really, I'm a focused CDA person. I'm an independent consultant of my own company, Life Over Time Solutions, but I do a lot of work with Lantana Consulting Group, who's really a powerhouse in the CDA space. And they have been the organization I've done a lot of my work with care plan documents through. We have a very rapid, a quick-paced agenda today. I'm going to make it fast so it won't hurt at all, I hope. Three 15-minute segments that will really give you some good background on CDA and consolidated CDA, and then a 15-minute block at the end so you guys can ask some questions. It's really going to be more of a drive-by presentation. I've selected slides that were created by Brett Marquardt and I for a class which we thought was really ambitious to try and teach CDA in a day, and we used to give that through OTEC. This is CDA in an hour, so we're going to be going very quickly through a kind of overview of everything. I wanted to start with a history just because often in order to understand the complexities of what we're up against today, you have to appreciate how we got here. And the base standard CDA, Clinical Document Architecture, actually got started in HL7 back in 1997, a long time ago. And we progressed through to Release 2, which is what we're working on right now, which was achieved in 2005. So it's pretty mature, the implementations that we're working with. However, many different groups started using CDA Release 2, and we ended up with this catastrophe of many, many different standards, all to do the same thing. And so in 2009, when Meaningful Use was starting to get ready to go, we really needed to be more specific about what we were doing with the specific implementations. And that's when consolidated CDA came in. This is a piece of work that harmonized a bunch of efforts across HITSP and HL7 and IHE and gave us a common set of documents. That's what we've been working with since then. The base standard continues to mature, but not as quickly as or as radically as we had envisioned. We actually canceled Release 3, and we've been working on a modest Release 2.1 to the base standard. And most of the energy has really gone into refining these implementation guides, the thing that's called C-CDA, Consolidated CDA. And right now we are on 2.1, and that's what's named in Meaningful Use Stage 3. It is backward compatible with C-CDA Release 1.1, so any knowledge really that started since the 1.1 time frame has been has persisted now going forward. CDA got started because of shortcomings with HL7 V2. You know, this notion of versioning, like we just talked about, is kind of a natural process, and it naturally creates complexity, but we just have to deal with it. V2 had some issues, and as a result, we wanted to create V3. These pipe delimited things were just not robust enough, and we wanted to take advantage of the strength of XML, and we wanted to take advantage of the power of the RIM to help interoperability. So CDA came as a result of trying to resolve some of the shortcomings of V2. And as you know, FHIR has cropped up as a sort of a next version after V3 to kind of say, well, we've got some ideas about how to do things in a better way than what we ended up with achieving in V3. And the point I want to make here is that really this is three ways of all representing the same information. Three different ways, or different standard ways of representing the same information. And so it's less different and more the same than most people appreciate. The work that we have done in CDA templates is no different than the work that's going on in what is called FHIR profiles. and implementation guides that describe how to use the base standard, further constraining of the base standard. All of the complexities that people complain about with CDA are in fact real and very much still there in FHIR as well. And as we progress and FHIR matures, people will find out that once you get past version 1, version 2, you start to realize that all standards are equally complex, and you more have to just buy into the idea that you have to embrace understanding, versioning the complexities so that you can work with that. It's a kind of a peeling the onion process, and I suppose that's good because it also evokes the notion of crying a little bit. But the challenge here is that base standards are broad and specific implementations are more narrow, and the only way you get from broad to narrow is to define some constraints down to what you need to specifically do. So the base standard CDA R2 further gets constrained in consolidated CDA to define some specific types of documents, and then where legislation is specific about what it wants in those documents, we have to go deeper and be more specific about what data types, data elements, etc. need to be present in those documents. As a result, you get a very complex kind of mapping exercise. There's terminology that's used in meaningful use, like transition of care documents or portability export summaries, things like that, which we never see in consolidated CDA. To merge these things together, and there's something called the Consolidated CDA Companion Guide that goes with meaningful use. We are in the a new one in September that will be for Consolidated CDA Release 2.1. And yes, it's a lot to get used to in the beginning, but there's no way around it. If you want to work with these standards, you need to embrace understanding the nuances that are there. As far as the base standard goes, there are 6 core principles that are really important why CDA is as useful and powerful as it is. And the first one is persistence. These documents do not go away like messages do. There's no real requirement around a message to stick around. But a document is persistent, and someone is responsible for persisting it, a steward. There's also a notion that these documents have the potential for authentication, and that makes them very powerful in terms of being able to be good records of what goes on in the process of care. They represent a context, so information within a CDA document is taken within the context that that document establishes, whether it's the context that's a single encounter or the context, sometimes C-CD documents creates a context that spans multiple encounters, but that context is expressed and you leveraged within the context of the document. It shows a whole picture of what's going on, so there's this sense that it's kind of the story, the whole story, nothing but the story kind of nature of it, and it is ultimately human readable, not just machine processable, but human readable. These tenets have allowed us to do some very powerful things with CDA, not often understood in the industry yet because uptake has been really slow and relatively imperfect. But the work we've been doing with the CDA Examples Task Force has really been raising the bar in some of the other validations, raising the bar. Oh, I picture here, I have some lovely Russian dolls that show you these nesting dolls as a way of thinking about the basic pieces of a CDA document, and this is always true in the nesting sort of way. The document is the outer kind of thing that is created, and within the context of the document, it has a header that gives you some specific information for indexing that document. If it's in a document registry or for a search and retrieval kind of process, then the meat of the document, the main information, is expressed in sections. The sections are known to be about certain kinds of information, and they are all human readable. If a document then has further machine readable of the information in the section, then those machine readable entries are included to describe the information that the human can read in the section. And sometimes those entry templates are complex and are built up of little parts and pieces that we call entry parts. That's your basic structure of every CDA document. It always has this structure because CDA is built on an information model that we get from the RIM. And so the context of having acts and participations and entities and entity relationships, this all is rooted in the HL7 v3 RIM. Our RMIM, which is a sort of a constraint of that for CDA, establishes the document header. It establishes the information that was used to structure a section, and then when sections have machine-readable entry, we have a model for expressing those machine-processable kind of clinical statement patterns right there. That's really, this picture is the whole picture of CDA. I included a little key, so if you go back over this and look at it yourself, you'll know what the colors mean. But basically, from there, we get a set of documents that can be created that are kind of a family stem back to CDA. And where previously a lot of this mess had started with documents of different types all over, IHE was doing one thing, HL7 was doing something, HITSI was, we really had to simplify that down, and that's how we ended up with consolidated CDA. I think I did not update this slide to give you the total counts of the 12 documents, and I think we're up to about 120 different entry templates, but you can count them for yourself. The important thing is to realize that these CDA documents now are facilitating information exchange throughout the entire health IT ecosystem. They can be used and created by individuals. We have the means of doing a patient-generated CDA document. They're generated and used by care providers, and all the information can be, this sort of structure of CDA can be used to exchange secondary use type information for quality, public health, and research. And these facilitate time-independent flows of information. So when someone wants to do research on something or an individual wants to look up a back history, the longitudinal nature of these CDA documents makes it possible to retrieve them from the steward, and you have these persistent snapshots in time. So they're a very, very valuable way of having standard processing of information over time. They come in a human-readable form, so there's a standard style sheet. A style sheet is sort of a mechanism for transforming an XML document into a human-readable HTML. And there's a standard way of doing that every type of consolidated CDA document can be run through that style sheet and produce a version of the information that's inside the CDA. The CDAs have sections, and this is a breakout to show you that a C-CD document, a continuity of care document, has certain kinds of required and optional sections inside of it. And there are other types of CDA, like a diagnostic image report, for example. And it's different because it's designed to have different sections inside of it to break down the different types of information that should be present. And many people don't understand the nature of the 12 different types of documents in consolidated CDA. It's an important point not to miss as you get started. All consolidated CDA documents are not CCDs. And so that's my point here. There's specialized documents that formulate laboratory reports, and there are specialized documents that allow you to share an unstructured document, like a PDF type of chunk of data that's not at all, but allows you to wrap that CDA header around that visual representation of the information so that it can be shared digitally, much more efficient way, and you have all the structured information in the header, but you have not yet taken on the task of trying to structure the body of the document into sections and perhaps machine-readable entry. Documents have lost their popularity because they were not called out in meaningful use, but they are incredibly powerful, and many implementers today who are working with CDA and with the use of direct to exchange CDA, many implementers are using unstructured documents, and so I always hope that they won't be forgotten about. Here's a list of lots of different types, other organizations besides HL7 and other implementation guides besides CDA exist. So there are many, many types of CDA documents that have been defined. And I think those are all the main points to kind of stick in your head as you have a little bit of a context for thinking about CDA. And now what I'd like to do is dig in to the header and the body of what a CDA document might look like. So here we go. This is sort of a walk-through that you'll get a sense of the space and how it's structured inside of a CDA document. We talked about that header. I showed it to you in the RMIM before. Just to count it a little bit, it's got 9 different participants and 5 act relationships. And that's not the slide I was hoping to show, so I'm a little bit, you might get a little bit more than what I was hoping to depict here. This is that part of the RMIM that is showing that, and the 9 participations are these blue pieces that you see here, and the 5 act relationships are these 5 blocks right here. They're very important because this is the main power. There's a lot of information in the header, and even with an unstructured document, if you can get the author, and let's see if I have it listed out. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I cut and paste from another presentation, so there's a little bit more in here than I was thinking. But basically, in the header, if you can, from those blue participations, there's 3 that are required. The record target, which talks about the patient that is the subject of the document. There's the author, who is the main person who is recording their view of the information for that particular patient, for that particular encounter or service event. And a third required participant that is the custodian. That's the steward who's responsible for persisting the document. Even just to get all the information for those 3 main participations is incredibly helpful. And there's others that go along with it that I'm going to jump over today. I don't think I covered, and I was hoping to cover a little bit about these act relationships over here, so let me just point to them. One of them, which is too small to see, is the encompassing encounter. Many people don't get the structure of the header because you don't really want to think about it in the order that these blocks are presented. I think it's better to think about it in terms of there's an encompassing encounter, and then within the encompassing encounter you may want to describe certain documented service events that happened or certain orders that are fulfilled. And finally, you may include information about certain consent authorizations that were appropriate for this information sharing. Those 4, and then finally, the relationship that this document may have to other documents that exist and are already in persistence, that they make up these act relationships. And as you get into thinking about creating CDA documents, the first place I always have people start is to go through the 9 participations, the 5 act relationships, and say, what do we want to document about this story? It's the who, what, when, where, and how. Document about this story in the header. Get that right before you move on to worrying about how you put content into the body. I'm going to jump over. Oh, I didn't give you. I'm going to jump back then to a little bit about the, I saw some slides in here about the body. So the body of the document starts at the decision over whether it will be a structured body or an unstructured body. If it's unstructured, you basically have that PDF or JPEG image that's just sort of stuck onto the bottom of this header. But if it's a structured body, then you have multiple sections that can be represented. These sections carry the human readable information. They may additionally have some machine processable entries that reflect or make that information that's in the human readable more machine processable. And that's where you get into combining the observations and the procedures and the supply and the act acts, and you can sort of recursively combine these blocks together to create a sentence structure or a clinical statement structure that allows you to make machine processable versions of that human readable information. That's basically the content of how you put documents together. Let me see if we ended with, we didn't really end with an example here, but I'll go back to, sorry about that. That's what happens when you just repurpose content for something else. I'll go back to this picture of the CDA C-CD document. So in a C-CD document, the header is represented up here. These are where this is where it's revealing the who, the participants of the document, and the what and where and when in the act relationships. And then this table of contents jumps you down into all of the different sections that are present in the document. And the implementation guide, the document template for C-CD, describes each of those sections. There has to be an allergy section, a medication section, a problem list of procedures, and a results section. And there may optionally be an advanced directive section, encounters, family history, et cetera, et cetera. Within the rules of CDA, all of the templates are what's called open templates. And so a C-CD document could actually have additional sections above and beyond these required and named optional sections should an organization decide that something additional needs to be shared. There are, what do we count them, 80 or so standard sections already defined in consolidated CDA, and there are even more that can be invented. But the standard is set up to allow for additional sections to be present, and it's a possibility. So as you look at specifying things, you may find that your document would be very similar to a CCD, but you might want some additional optional sections or something like that, and that's possible within the constraints of the standard. Let me see how I'm doing on time, because if I'm doing well, I'm going to leave the extra minutes for more questions at the end, because I think that will be more helpful. Let's get to our next bus here. Yeah, I'm running about 5 minutes ahead. That's good. So I hope you guys have your seatbelts fastened, because we're going fast. I want to shift to talking about the care plan document that is one of the document types, sort of one of the newer document types. It did not exist in Consolidated CDA Release 1 or 1.1. but it was invented when we went to Consolidated CDA Release 2.0. And it's just now becoming more popular to explore the use of care plan documents because Meaningful Use Stage 3 has included it and named it along with the CCD, the discharge summary, and the referral note as an important supported kind of document that you can certify. Well, in the process of developing this care plan document, it just so happened that, that some work was done very late in the process, during the ballot process, that exposed some shortcomings with the care plan document template. But there wasn't sufficient time to invent a solution, and the person or group that brought forward the issue didn't themselves have a recommendation for how to solve the problem. They just knew there was a problem. And the problem is that the care plan document template right now doesn't provide sufficient implementer guidance to know how to represent in one document a situation where one person has multiple care plans. It just sort of gives us a notion of how you do a care plan, but it doesn't really tell us how you would express and share the content when there's really multiple care plans going on at the same time. And so Blue Cross Blue Shield Association basically commissioned Lantana, who had me, help them address their concerns. That major one that I just described was their top issue, but they actually had 19 different gaps that they could see were requirements that they had for using care plan documents, but they did not find in the implementation guide that they could know what to do to address those needs. And so we made a report that demonstrated how an implementer might, within the constructs of CDA, but go above and beyond the guidance in the implementation guide for care plan document to address those 19 issues. We did work from a sample care plan that was provided by there were several groups that were participating in this work, and we were able to look at some samples, but there were very few care plan samples available. The industry is just really starting to wrap their head around how all this works. So we created a storyboard that was also used in the domain analysis model to describe a common kind of care scenario that included not only provider care but also a role for a payer in terms of doing disease management and case management with a patient, so that we had a complex scenario that we could work with in trying to address these gaps. Gave us a lot of data to work with. And then I sort of creatively, just by hand, used the CDA standard to address those gaps. The report that was written to describe how to do that is available on the HL7 website, on the patient care wiki, and I included the link right here if you have time to read a 50-page document. It goes over all that in detail, but the important thing I think to summarize is the types of different gaps that they had already identified and where we had started to address some of them, so that if you're also thinking about some of those issues, you realize that you don't have to start from scratch. There's some good work already in place to get started. And then to understand how we took the CDA care plan document standard, which focuses on creating documents that have a header and 4 primary sections in them: a health concerns section, a goals section, an intervention section, and a section that documents both assessments, sort of health status evaluation assessments, and outcomes together in that one section. So we took that basic guidance that has already been provided in Consolidated CDA, and we sort of made it made a new kind of structure, what we called a container, that's a recursive kind of notion of something that can represent an individual care plan and has the complexity built in that it can actually put plans within plans in case you need to do that. But basically, the ability to partition certain information away from other information and put unique header or enrollment type information that might be different from plan to plan, and have a place to put all of those data elements to make it work without breaking any of the rules that are established for the care plan document. So the way that we did that gives you a new, more specific pattern for making a plan that is a human readable plan that can be, have multiple plans inside of it, but also gives you the linkages to represent that information in machine readable entries that have relationships to each other. So for example, goals can be the goals that were established to address a particular concern, and interventions can be related to the goals, the things that we're doing to make progress towards the goal. The entries can all be linked together so that there's machine processable relationships between the entries, and the entries are related back to the human readable narrative in each of the sections, so you can easily move from a chunk of concerns to the specific plans that those concerns are represented in. And it really gives us a new way of a kind of a multi-dimensional way of making an XML document that you can assess, and you can by batching it all up in terms of all of the concerns that we know for that patient, or you can look at it in the other way where you're looking at how many plans they have and which concerns are in what plan. It's still your basic XML document. The style sheet still exposes everything that's in it. All of the same things that we talked about already apply, but it has this different set of sections and a different sort of construct than any other CDA documents that people have really been exposed to previously in Consolidated CDA. We have we face some uncharted areas. A lot of value set concepts are missing. They're not given in consolidated CDA, and the gap work was not positioned to say what the value sets need to be. So we are starting to see some groups crop up within the industry to say, you know, what is the set of terms that we need to express what your enrollment status is, or what are the set of terms that we need to express the different roles for care team members. We're starting to see some of that work happen, but that needs to be addressed. As I said, the design of the document that uses both the 4 chunks or 4 sections to accumulate machine-readable entries, all grouped together, concerns together, goals together, interventions together, etc. Plus, at the same time, the new sort of sections that group the human-readable information by care plan gives us the ability to look at the document to reveal it with different style sheets that are more powerful in more unique ways than we've had in the past.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, somebody's coming. Sorry, somebody must not be on mute, but I think that I'm going to skip a little bit about some of the details about our recommendations and examples there, but I will say that as a result of that gap analysis work, we recommended to have some pilots to test some of these sketches and ideas to see if they proved out to be useful. And that's what Blue Cross Blue Shield Association did. They got 5 or 6 different vendors together, and during the end of 2015, beginning of 2016, in a very short 8-week proof of concept project, we brought a group of people together to enact that use case that I showed you earlier. And we basically took Adam Everyman from a C-CD document that was representing the information from his annual exam to a discharge summary that captured the information about an emergency department visit that he had for an asthma attack, and shared all of this with a payer who had a care management system that then combined all this together, and they were looking at both his diabetes, another issue that he had going on, and his asthma, and showing how these multiple care plans could be updated and then expressed in a single CDA document using that containerized design. It was very successful. We learned a lot doing it. I included 2 links. The project summary is a YouTube video that's about 6 minutes, maybe 5. Very short review of what we did in that proof of concept project. And then I would encourage you on August 1st, if you'd like to hear more about it, we're going to be giving a sort of a recap about how we did this proof of concept, and I included the link to registering for the HIMSS Health Story presentation that would be given on August 1st. Here's a picture of the CDA document. I'm sorry, CCD document. You can tell it's a CCD by the nature of the sections that are included right here. And this just shows we had a vendor who was using Open EHR to create an EHR environment and produce that CCD document. We also had an EHR that produced the discharge summary. I'm not showing it, but here, oh, let me see if I can redo that without all of them jumping. There's, it's automated, I guess, to run together, but you can see there was a container for his asthma care plan, and then there was another container inside of this document. So you have the header and 2 of these care plan containers. Each care plan container has a kind of an enrollment header inside of it that's also machine processable, and then it has the information laid out with that relationship where there's problems or health concerns, and then the concerns have related goals, and these goals have related interventions. We also were keeping track in this example. We were trying to do a little bit of closed loop. So besides a problem with goals, if this goal, after having certain interventions, interventions that get completed, the goal were to complete, we record the completed goals that are helping to work on this problem. And so the information flow really goes sort of across and looping back to close the loop. So these are problems with goals with interventions, and as the interventions complete, you see them listed as completed interventions. As completed interventions push you toward your goal, goals may be met. Met goals appear over here as helping to deal with the problem. So that was the basic pattern that we took. And we've really gotten a lot of uptake from talking to people about this vision and possibility. The state of New York has got some significant piloting work that they're looking at doing, and you guys and some other pilots that are bringing another new standard that came out in July around a patient-generated document where patients can express their goals, preferences, and priorities for care should they not be able to speak for themselves in an emergency situation or at the end of their life. And so we're working with showing how these patient-generated care plan type, advanced care plan documents can also be considered and integrated in with other clinical care plan documents. There's some work going on that we're harmonizing all of this and looking at it also from a FHIR perspective because, as I said, this is all the same information. It's just two different ways of representing and working with it. And we are continuing to get more people interested in working on some of the value set gaps that we've discovered around, I think the two on the top of my mind are expressing care team membership and enrollment status for the different plans. We did learn to take more of a crawl, walk, run strategy, expecting vendors to immediately produce CDA documents that have fully expressed machine processable discrete data is just unrealistic. We're too early in the process, and we found there to be huge benefits from simply getting to the point that we could share an unstructured CDA or what's called a level 2 CDA document where you've got the header populated and those sections in the body so that you can at least tell the difference between what are the problems, what are the goals, what are the interventions. And we were able to really make some great progress without pushing the vendors to have to, right from the start, know how to express all of that information in discrete level 3 entry-level templates. So we see care plans as an important new or different sort of player to help complete the landscape of the different types of information and types of documents that we're exchanging out there to improve interoperability. They're really coming on the scene as a unique sort of spot of their own, and many people are interested in doing something more with care plans, which I think is why you guys asked me to come and talk a little bit about this stuff. And I managed to scrape up an extra 5 minutes, so we'll really have 20 minutes for questions. And I'm open to whatever interests you that you'd like to talk more about, or if you just want to, ask me questions about whatever's on the tip of your mind, what you're up against and what you want to try and accomplish, feel free to just ask. And if you're more comfortable, I can stop the recording. That's the other thing that I can do if you'd like. Jenna, would you prefer me to stop the recording and allow people to just feel free to ask whatever questions they want to?
Sure, that might be, well, actually, I'm torn because it might be nice to have the questions for folks who want to come back and listen later.
Okay. We can always cut it if somebody feels uncomfortable or wants to say, like, I want to ask a really dumb question. We can turn the recording off, but let's keep it running then for now and see how it goes.
So I'll start with a dumb question so others will feel comfortable maybe asking a dumb question also. So I was curious about the kind of idea of persistence and C-CDA documents being sort of unaltered. And particularly as I kind of try to conceptualize the care plan, I think it would be a document that would be sort of constantly being changed and updated. And so I guess I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about, maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into the persistent aspect, but once a C-CDA document is made, does it kind of persist forever in that form, or can it be updated
Yes, it's a really, really good question. It takes me back to that. Let me, I'm going to come out of this presentation mode so I can jump around a little bit. It comes back to the comment that I made about the header having this related document pointer in it right here. If you think of, do you remember when you were a kid, they had this art assignment you do, you take a stack of index cards and you'd color a little ball on the first index card, and then on the second index card you'd make the ball go up a little bit more and up a little bit more each card, and then eventually you'd like run your finger through this deck of cards and the ball would bounce across the page. The CDA documents are point-in-time snapshots, but there's nothing preventing it from being versioned. And I talked about versioning early on because this is a concept that people have to get used to. Even fire resources, they version. Versioning is a really important part of how information moves forward over time. So a persistent CDA document, you have version 1. If somebody updates it, it makes version 2, version 3, version 4, and you can keep track of who made the update. Maybe somebody authored version 1 and somebody else authored version 2 and version 3, and CDA is designed. There are several fields. It's called set ID and version number here in the main part of the header, and then there are multiple pointers that you can point back to other documents that may have been created before or been the basis for the one you're making now. You can point back to them. So it becomes kind of what would be like an audit log or a logged set of information that gives you that longitudinal view over time.
And just to put that in context to help me sort of wrap my brain around it, so say you have a care plan document for a given patient that's originally developed by their primary care provider, and then they're referred out to a nephrologist, and that document is sent to the nephrologist who uploads it into his or her system, perhaps authors of version 2, where new information is added, and then he would send the version 2 back to the primary care provider and anybody else, any other providers that the patient would be. So I guess how does that process of sharing, and maybe that's not fully figured out yet, but how does that process of sharing work so that you don't end up with version control issues, so to speak?
Well, you always will have version control issues. Even if you have a health information exchange in the middle, who's being the one who keeps track of the pile. Imagine that each of those documents was a physical piece of paper, and they have a pile, and they always know which one's on the top of the pile, and somebody asks for the current care plan, they give the one that's on the top of the pile. And if somebody then updates it and says, oh, I have made a new version, a more recent, that appends to or transforms the previous one, then it goes on the top of the pile, and next time somebody asks, unless they specifically ask for an older version, maybe I want to go back and say, what was the plan last year? Right. But if I just want the current plan, then that health information exchange would be in a position of delivering up the current plan.
So it would be
as they know.
The individual provider to basically say, let me double check and make sure I have the most recent version every time the patient checks that. Okay.
Yep. And as people create plans, you get into this aspect of standards development that kind of moves beyond syntax, structure, and semantics into process. And perhaps you have to say, well, our process is that if you are the creator of a care plan, somebody brings it in, and then they update the plan, then they're the author of the next version, but they might want to have you might want to have a policy that says your job is to always make sure that the information recipient of the plan that you make includes prior authors, because prior authors should be informed if you're making a new version. And
right.
Information recipient is one of the blue participations here. And so you could have a process that says more of a push as opposed to a pull. With a push, you say, anybody changes this, always put your most recent copy back at the Health Information Exchange, and we'll always draw current from there. There's also a push model where you can say, if you read this plan and there's, you know, 2 other authors on it, then if you make a new version, please include them as information recipients, and when you make your, you know, your push direct message, make sure they get a copy of what you've updated. It gets to be a little bit more of a process or a procedural thing. CDA itself as a standard does not specify how to do it. It's more of an implementation question.
Gotcha. And this goes well outside the scope of C-CDA, but sort of related. If somebody, do you know if anybody's thought about sort of what the process would be if, say, there's disagreement about a change? So say, you know, the primary care provider sets a blood pressure goal and the nephrologist wants a different blood pressure goal. You know, other than changing it and having the primary care provider be alerted, do you know if anybody's looking at processes to kind of...
Yes, there's a very good piece of work. I will dig up the link for you. It's an HL7 document that was created in the patient care work group, I want to say 2 years ago, and it's called CCS, and I don't even really remember what CCS stands for. Something about like care coordination service, I think. But it was very intricate, detailed work around the teaming that needs to go on and dealing with, well, what if the patient doesn't want to do what the care team recommends, or what if there's care team members that don't agree with other care team members, and how do you resolve conflict? And they really got deep into topics like that. It's more of a domain analysis, I want to say a domain analysis. It's probably considered more of like a functional analysis document, and it has not been largely looked at by, you know, the people who are specified CDA and stuff like that. But I think it's forward thinking, and you should definitely read it and put some of that background into your thought stew as you get started.
Great, thank you.
Surely somebody must some other questions. What are you hoping to do with this information? What do you see as, like, where are you going with this knowledge?
So right now our objective is to kind of identify the elements, or the, I guess, entries that should be included for chronic kidney disease within the care plan. So we're kind of working from those 4 buckets that you talked about: the health concerns, interventions, goals, and health status evaluation and outcomes, to try to say, like, what types of data would you want in there for a person who has CKD? And so, you know, kidney function and kidney damage, and like what lab value should be included for a person with kidney disease, things like that.
Yeah.
And then once we've kind of identified what information, what entries should be included, trying to map that back to, you know, link codes, SNOMED, whatever, you know, ICD codes, whatever information is available in the EHR, so that could kind of be sort of automatically generated. And then obviously, of course, there's always items that are maybe a little less discrete. You know, you know, one example would be sort of patient goals. If they want to stay at work, you know, so that's kind of continuing to work while on dialysis can be a big issue. And so if that's their first priority, but that's not something that is easily, you know, captured. And so trying to think through how that type of information might be included, because it's something that, you know, seems like it would be really important to include in sort of a care treatment. Yeah,
definitely.
And I know
patient goals, definitely.
Yeah.
You can, you know, have you ever just cracked open the consolidated CDA 2.1 implementation guide standard to attempt to read the specifications for these 4 sections?
No, but I probably should. I guess
it'd be a good lesson, you know, maybe it'd be a good lesson to do it. It's a little bit overwhelming because it's a big PDF document, and you're sort of like, oh, how do I, like, digest all of this? But once you know how to read it and how to jump around inside of it, the thing that would be helpful is that these sections, not only do they have good definitions about what belongs in each of the sections, that generally orients you on what goes where, but there's many, many clinical statement patterns. These entry templates have already been defined for each of these 4 sections. And to me, they're like, do you remember Mad Libs, those little documents, and it was kind of like a funny story? It was a serious, it was a regular story, but it would leave gaps in the sentence, and you stick a word in, and it makes this really funny thing. Well, these are like Mad Lib pattern statements about a health concern or a health risk or a you know, there's quite a few of these patterns that have already been established inside the standard, and you might be able to shortcut some of your work by understanding what the entry patterns are, and then how you can leverage the entry patterns by having different value sets to say, okay, well, we're gonna use this XYZ entry template, and then right here where we can use a different set of codes, this will be our set of codes for representing, you know, these certain kidney health concerns, or, you know, kidney care related health concerns, or certain interventions that, you know, like that stuff that's relevant for us, and actually pick out your clinical statement models and use those structures to help jumpstart your analysis of finding the different data elements or different pieces of information that you want to represent.
Excellent. And I do have one more question, but I want to pause for a second because, you know, in case anybody has any other questions, I don't want to hog all the questioning time.
I guess you get to hog away.
Okay. So my last question is about the standard style sheet, which, you know, converts to a human readable version. One of the things that we've kind of thought about in our working group is how information might be displayed differently for different people. So a dietitian may want certain information to be displayed than the nephrologist might want. Or the patient may want to see different information or have different context provided along that information to kind of make it a little bit more understandable. And so I was wondering, I mean, I know that, or my understanding of the standard style sheet is that it does not kind of specify that detail. It's more about getting code to human readable, but is
Sure, I understand your question. And here's what I would say. The purpose of the standard style sheet and what we continue to try to revise it to make it do is the standard style sheet's job is to expose everything that's in the document, right? Because it's a validation issue. We want a way to show everything that's in that document. And that's important because you don't want to be passing documents around that you can't see what's in them. So as a first style sheet, it made a lot of sense. And for validation purposes, if somebody wants to say, well, but show me all the information that's in this document, it actually takes a fair amount of work to make sure that the style sheet exposes everything. Now, given that you have one that exposes everything, of course it would make sense to make other alternate style sheets that tailor the information to be reviewed for people who have different needs. But the results we're finding that came out of the, I don't know if you heard about, there was a big project we've been running for the past year and a half that's called Relevant and Pertinent. And we did a big survey to a bunch of industry groups and clinicians to get feedback on how do we make the data in CDA documents more relevant and pertinent. And they, of course, responded by saying, we would like more information and we would like less. You know, I mean, it was just across the board. There was so much diversity where people were like, you're not giving me enough information or you're giving me too much. So the conclusion was that the consumers of these documents really need to get better at creating tools that expose the right parts of this, almost if you think of a CDA document as a portable database. Exposing the right parts of this portable database in the right, most relevant way for the anticipated user, reader of the document, that's exactly the way people need to go. It was a kind of evolutionary process. It was hard enough to learn how to figure out how to make these CDA documents, and now that we're getting better at making them, it's time to think about getting better at consuming them.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, this is Cam Calontar, nephrologist. It was very educational for me. I learned a lot. And yet I also struggle at the same time to connect some of these great possibilities and opportunities and resources to our field. It was quite new to me, and I was wondering why I may have some disconnect here, but as far as I know, we in nephrology have not embarked on this CDA system. And I was wondering why, for example, in Kaiser Permanente or VA or other systems, this never came up, or maybe came up, but people decided for now to do otherwise. Is there any? Is anybody aware of any efforts to connect CDA to nephrology, CKD care? I mean, of course, I understand this is our efforts. That's why we are listening to this. But was there any efforts in the past?
Jenna, do you know? I don't know of any. This is the first that I've really been contacted specifically by folks from your area of expertise, but I know the VA has a very large implementation around using CDA documents for these more general sort of summary document types, and maybe it's just a process that specialty areas are coming after first addressing some of these more patient summary requirements.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, because I was just wondering. So, what kind of challenges would we in CKD care anticipate if we want to ever consider connecting CDA, and what would be just to be ahead of the curve? What we think that CDA may be or may not be quite the best system for CKD patient care.
I think your initial challenge will be one of fit. As you said, you're struggling with, how do I make this fit? And I think if you look at the sections that are defined in consolidated CDA right now, like let's end on one of these slides where it had some sections. You look at these sections and you say, well, gosh, if I was designing a document that really expresses the kind of information I need to record about a patient with kidney disease, aren't necessarily the ones, or maybe I'd use some of these sections, but there'd be other sections that are much more specific to the kind of information that we're documenting and that we need to use to take care of these patients. So you might be up against finding that while years of work has already happened, maybe because nobody in your discipline has been working on it yet, there may be some sections of information that haven't been well defined yet, and you might have not all of the Lego blocks available to you that you feel you need, and you may need to get involved at the level of sort of creating your own implementation guide where you define some new additional sections that have some more specific clinical statement patterns in them, because you need a certain structure to express the information that you want, and you might just up against building more rather than just feeling like CDA has everything you need ready to go.
I'm not aware of anything that's going on in nephrology, in terms of, aside from what we're doing. I do think that a lot of C-CDA and C-CDA, a lot of these activities have not maybe necessarily been disease specific, and Lisa, correct me if my presumption there is incorrect. I think with the kind of origination of the care plan, which has been a relatively recent focus, I think that's when people have started a little bit more to think about using these for sort of disease-specific projects.
Yeah, documents. Yeah, I think you're right. I would say the only example that I could pull up, and maybe another place that you would want to look a little bit, is has done some very disease-specific stuff, and cardiology has done some very disease-specific stuff, where you do see specialists come in and they create much more elaborate entries. I can remember the cancer guys doing these, I think it's called like TNM models or something like that, where they're really talking about how cancers are staged and described, and they had to create a lot of very specific content because this more generalized set of patterns just didn't get them where they needed to be. And so cancer and cardiology would be two other areas that are more disease specific that might show you an example of how you have to make some structural parts that fit your needs.
Great.
Okay, we're about 2 minutes after, so I don't want to make you late for your 3 o'clock appointment. So I think, Jenna, unless there's anything else, I'll stop the recording and hope that GoToMeeting did a good job of capturing it all.
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate it. This was really helpful.
Okay, good luck on your adventure. Enjoy CDA.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.